Thanks for joining us here on RT International. We get straight to our breaking news for you this hour. A war zone disagreement between Moscow and Washington. The Russian Defense Ministry has claimed that U.S. warplanes bombed the Syrian city of Aleppo on Wednesday. However, Pentagon chiefs have blamed Russia for the airstrikes, saying 2 hospitals were destroyed. Russia's defense ministry now investigating the 9 targets reportedly hit by U.S. warplanes, trying to find out whether any hospitals were among them. We'll bring you the latest on this breaking news as soon as we get it. Now, as diplomats descend on Munich for Syria talks, media reporting now that Russia plans to propose a ceasefire in Syria starting March the 1st. Those potentially part of a growing frenzy over Moscow's involvement in the conflict. One New York Times article, for instance, says the rules of the game in Syria have changed, with Russia possibly proving the American strategy there is flawed. The report adds that this makes the upcoming talks critical for the U.S. delegation, led by Secretary Kerry. Meanwhile, mainstream media are ganging up on Russia's anti-terrorist campaign.
Russian airstrikes pound the key battleground daily.
This is said to be the aftermath of just one of the Russian airstrikes pounding Aleppo.
Tens of thousands have fled the city already in the face of a major military offensive.
The Syrian regime is on a winning streak with the help of Russian bombs. That's caused people to flee in their thousands.
So why are all the media, the Western media, of course not all, but the most powerful, is trying to accuse Russia in destroying this negotiation process? This is a big question. We regard this as a part of information war.
We asked political analyst Caleb Mopan to explain what's going on.
Well, for the last 4 years, the coverage of the Syrian crisis in Western media has been completely biased and slanted. All throughout the war, you have had the terrorists, the insurgents, foreign-backed trained militants. They have been going into churches and slaughtering Christians. They have been slaughtering religious minorities, killing people, just beheading people, torturing people, using child soldiers. And yet the Western media says nothing about this. We just hear an endless chorus of Assad the dictator and Assad must go.
The Munich talks start amid intense battles to retake the Aleppo province. To the north, Syrian and Kurd fighters have recaptured a key airport held by al-Nusra for more than 2 years. Russian airstrikes, meantime, have killed 2 top terrorist chiefs. Now, RT's Murad Gazdiev went to the war zone in Aleppo. He told my colleague Neil Harvey how the situation for locals has become desperate.
Well, before the civil war began, Aleppo was Syria's largest city. It is really something of a mixing pot. You had all sorts living together there. You had Assyrians, Kurds, Arabs, Armenians, Turks, all living together somewhat, peacefully.
And we're talking about an ancient city as well, aren't we? Somewhere that actually attracted a lot of tourism.
And that was just one side of Aleppo, hundreds of thousands of tourists. There was also business, there was industry, there was finance, jobs. It was a bustling metropolis. Then, of course, the civil war began.
And as I understand, the diversity of Aleppo, that in itself is a problem.
Well, it helped feed the problem, and that there's so many different views. Some neighborhoods supported the government, other neighborhoods supported the rebels. Some tried to stay out of it. There's not a street left unmarked by fighting in Aleppo. Nobody really did manage to stay out of it. And as for the belligerents, well, given how much of a mixing pot the city was, you had really all flavors of rebels in Aleppo at one point or another, from the moderate FSA to Nusra, al-Qaeda, to even ISIS in the city at one point.
And prior to all this conflict, Aleppo was a wealthy area as well, wasn't it? That must have provided some opportunities for some.
Well, it did. Like this video, for example, shows rebels moving machinery, heavy machinery from Aleppo across the Turkish border into Turkey, apparently selling it. They say they liberated this machinery. Stole it. Apparently, according to the Syrian government, 1 year into the revolution, 1,000 factories just in Aleppo and around Aleppo were robbed. They were pilfered, and all the stripped of valuables and all the stuff sold across the border in Turkey. This is not even going into the roving bands of bandits or rebels, whatever they were at that point, walking around the city when they first went into it, you know, robbing whoever they didn't like. And if they didn't like you enough, you know, it didn't just stop with robbery or mugging. It could be fatal. You know, mass executions in Aleppo were not a rarity. They weren't a unique thing. They happened often. This video, for example, shows rebels throwing postal workers off of a roof because they worked for the government. In fact, at one point, rebels actually turned electricity and water supplies off to the entire city because they couldn't switch, you know, unplug just the government-controlled areas. So they disconnected everything, even areas that they controlled. So, you know, is it at all surprising that so many people fled Aleppo?
To be fair, though, there were barrel bombs, weren't there? And there were government attacks on rebel neighbourhoods. The government did play a part.
Exactly. But it's, you know, the blame is on both sides. It's nowhere near as one-sided as the mainstream media would have you believe. For example, how much time did they devote to all of this? You know, the stuff I just went through. Nowhere near as much as they devoted to barrel bombs, for example. And you know, Syrians themselves, they've grown tired of it all. All they really want is just an end to it all, an end to the fighting.
During the siege, we didn't have enough water. There was no electricity or gas.
The situation was very difficult during the siege. That's because armed groups blockaded us completely.
During the siege, which lasted for about 4 years, we received only one humanitarian aid package from the Red Crescent.
بيتنا انضرب خالص راح دمار شامل صار بينا قمر صار بينا كل شيء صار بينا بس سوريا ترجع ونظل مثل أولي ونمشي ونمزح ونضحك مثل أول